In February 2025, the United States southern border saw just 8,349 migrant encounters, a 94% drop from the previous year. The border appears sealed, but crops are rotting in California fields, housing construction has stalled, and food prices are rising. To understand why a sealed border creates new crises, we must go back 170 years. In this video, we will explore how a war in 1848 created this border, why the United States recruited, then criminalized millions of Mexican workers, what the data actually says about fentanyl smuggling, and why both parties agree the system is broken, yet nothing changes. If you want to understand the border beyond sound bites, stay with me for the next 12 minutes.
As of early 2025, the numbers are dramatic. Fiscal year 2024 saw 2.1 million border encounters. By February 2025, that collapsed to 8,000 encounters. The new administration implemented a zero-release policy, expanded detention facilities, and launched mass deportations, exceeding 527,000 removals. Republicans declare victory. The border is secure. Democrats call it a humanitarian disaster. But here is what neither side anticipated. Food prices rose 3.1% by December 2025. The National Association of Home Builders reported 19,000 homes were not built due to labor shortages, costing $10.8 billion. California farmers reported unharvested crops rotting in fields. The crisis did not disappear. It moved from the border to the grocery store. So how did we get here? The answer lies in 1848.
The United States-Mexico border is a line drawn by conquest. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War. Mexico ceded half its territory for $15 million. 100,000 Mexican citizens suddenly lived in United States territory. The border crossed them, not the other way around. In Mexico, this is remembered as the war where we lost half our country. The saying persists. We did not cross the border crossed us. Here is the critical truth. The United States government actively recruited millions of Mexican workers, then criminalized them. From 1942 to 1964, the Bracero program brought 4.6 million Mexican guest workers to American farms. United States agriculture restructured around this cheap labor. When the program ended in 1964 to protect American workers, the demand for labor remained. The supply of workers remained, but the legal channel vanished overnight. The result? The illegal immigration of the 1970s and 80s was the same Bracero workforce continuing without authorization. When farmers tried to replace them, crops requiring hand-picking simply were not harvested. American workers did not fill those jobs. This pattern repeats today. Mass deportations in 2025 led to rotting crops, not Americans entering fields. In 1986, President Reagan signed the Immigration Reform and Control Act. It granted amnesty to 2.7 million people, increased border security, and made hiring unauthorized workers illegal. But it created no future legal pathways. Employer sanctions were weakly enforced. Companies faced minimal consequences as long as they collected paperwork, even if obviously fraudulent. IRCA was the moment America chose border enforcement over labor management. Every policy since has repeated this pattern. Reinforce the magnet of jobs while fortifying the physical line. In 1994, Operation Gatekeeper sealed urban crossing points like San Diego, forcing migrants into deadly deserts. Between 1994 and 2008, over 5,600 people died. By 2022, more than 2 deaths per day. Crossing became so dangerous that migrants needed professional smugglers. Human smuggling transformed from informal help into a multi-billion-dollar cartel industry. Fees rose from $2,000 to $26,000 today.
One of the most repeated claims in American politics is that migrants bring fentanyl across the border in backpacks. This narrative has been used to justify billions in border wall funding, mass deportations, and enhanced enforcement. Politicians from both parties have invoked the fentanyl crisis to argue for sealing the border. But when we examine the data, a completely different picture emerges. According to Customs and Border Protection statistics, over 90% of fentanyl seizures occur at legal ports of entry, not in the open desert between them. The drugs are hidden in vehicles, concealed in secret compartments built into cars and trucks, or smuggled through in commercial shipping containers passing through official checkpoints. This is not migrants wading across the Rio Grande with drugs in backpacks. This is sophisticated smuggling operations using legitimate commerce as cover. Even more revealing is who gets caught. Data from the United States Sentencing Commission shows that in fiscal year 2024, 78.9% of convicted fentanyl traffickers in southern border districts were United States citizens, not migrants. Why do cartels prefer American citizens for smuggling? The answer is operational security. A United States passport receives far less scrutiny from border agents than a migrant attempting to cross illegally. Cartels recruit American citizens, often from border towns, precisely because they can drive through checkpoints with minimal inspection. Think about the logic. A migrant crossing the Rio Grande illegally is trying to evade detection entirely. They are not going to carry 50 pounds of fentanyl, which would guarantee their arrest and federal prosecution. The fentanyl-carrying migrant narrative remains politically potent, but the operational reality is negligible. As the land border has hardened in 2025 and 26, cartels have not given up. They have adapted with remarkable technological sophistication. Reports indicate they have deployed military-grade drones, influenced by tactics observed in the Ukraine conflict. Some cartel operatives have even traveled to conflict zones to train in drone warfare. These drones are used for surveillance and to move high-value, low-weight contraband like fentanyl over walls, rendering physical barriers partially obsolete for narcotics. Additionally, there has been a marked increase in maritime smuggling. Panga boat landings have been reported as far north as Los Angeles and Ventura counties in California, shifting the enforcement burden from Border Patrol to the Coast Guard. The northern border with Canada has also seen a relative surge, with some sectors reporting a 600% increase in apprehensions compared to previous years. The tactical lesson is clear. Prevention through deterrence creates adaptation, not cessation. Physical barriers are irrelevant to drones, boats, and legal ports of entry. Enforcement that does not address demand simply changes the method of supply.
To understand the current political divide, we must present the arguments from both sides fairly. From the Conservative and Republican perspective, the primary concern is national sovereignty. The core argument is straightforward. A nation without borders is not a nation. The rule of law is foundational to American democracy. When millions of people enter illegally, it undermines the legal immigration system and rewards lawbreaking. This creates what economists call a moral hazard, sending a message that breaking the law will eventually be rewarded with amnesty. There are significant economic concerns as well. Conservatives argue that illegal immigration creates unfair job competition for low-skilled American workers, particularly in construction, agriculture, and service industries. They cite studies showing wage depression in sectors with high concentrations of undocumented workers. From a fiscal perspective, they point to the costs of public services. Undocumented immigrants use schools, emergency rooms, and other public resources, and while they pay some taxes, conservatives argue the net fiscal impact is negative. On security, the focus is intense. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45, killing over 100,000 people annually. While we have just discussed the data on who smuggles fentanyl, conservatives argue that any illegal crossing represents a potential security vulnerability. They point to the got-away population, an estimated 2 million individuals since fiscal year 2021, who were detected by cameras and sensors but not apprehended. Who are these people? What are their intentions? Without knowing, conservatives argue this represents an unacceptable national security risk. From a systems perspective, conservatives contend that the asylum system is being gamed and overwhelmed. Immigration courts currently have a backlog exceeding 3 million cases. People claim asylum knowing it will take years for their case to be heard, during which time they can work in the United States. Detention capacity has been exceeded repeatedly, forcing catch and release. The sheer volume of arrivals is unsustainable for border communities and the immigration system. Proposed solutions from this perspective include completing the border wall to create a physical deterrent, reinstating Remain in Mexico policies so asylum seekers wait in Mexico rather than the United States, ending catch and release by expanding detention capacity, conducting mass deportations to deter future crossings, and mandating E-Verify for all employers to eliminate the job magnet. Key voices articulating this perspective include the Heritage Foundation, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, the Center for Immigration Studies, and Republican members of the House Homeland Security Committee. Their argument, in essence, is that enforcement works when applied consistently, and the 2025 numbers prove it.
From the progressive and democratic perspective, the primary framework is humanitarian obligation and economic reality. Asylum, they argue, is not a loophole. It is a legal right enshrined in the 1951 Refugee Convention and United States law. People fleeing violence and persecution deserve protection. This is a bedrock principle of international human rights law that the United States helped establish after World War II. Progressives emphasize root causes. The argument is that people do not risk death in the desert for minor economic improvements. They are fleeing gang violence in Honduras and El Salvador, where murder rates are among the highest in the world. They are fleeing political persecution in Nicaragua and Venezuela, where authoritarian governments jail and torture dissidents. They are fleeing crop failures caused by climate change in Guatemala, where multi-year droughts have destroyed subsistence farming. The United States, progressives argue, has a historical responsibility here, having destabilized Central America through Cold War interventions, support for military dictatorships, and current drug war policies that empower cartels. The family separation policy implemented in 2018 under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance approach is cited as a moral failure. Thousands of children were forcibly separated from their parents at the border, many of whom have never been reunited. Progressives argue this represents cruelty as policy, designed to deter asylum seeking through trauma. On economics, the progressive view is that immigrants are net contributors, not drains. Undocumented workers fill critical labor gaps in agriculture, construction, hospitality, and services. According to the American Immigration Council, undocumented immigrants paid $96.7 billion in federal, state, and local taxes in 2022, including sales taxes, property taxes, and income taxes withheld from paychecks, despite being ineligible for most federal benefits, like Social Security, Medicare, and food stamps. They pay in, but cannot collect. Moreover, immigrants start businesses at higher rates than native-born Americans and contribute to innovation. 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. The notion that immigrants are simply taking jobs ignores the reality that they are also creating jobs and economic growth. Progressives argue the system is broken precisely because legal immigration is dysfunctional. There is no viable legal pathway for low-skilled workers who want to work legally. The Bracero program ended in 1964. Since then, if you are a Mexican or Central American laborer with no family ties to the United States, there is essentially no way to legally work here, even though American employers desperately need you. The waiting list for employment-based green cards for unskilled workers is effectively infinite, measured in decades. Immigration courts are drastically underfunded, creating the massive backlog that conservatives cite. The solution, progressives argue, is not to shut down the system, but to adequately fund it so cases can be heard in months, not years. Enforcement-only approaches have been tried for 40 years and have demonstrably failed. Spending on border enforcement has increased tenfold since the 1990s, yet unauthorized immigration persists. Proposed solutions from this perspective include creating a pathway to citizenship for the roughly 11 million undocumented immigrants currently in the United States, particularly DACA recipients who came as children, and temporary protected status holders from countries facing crises. Expanding legal immigration channels to match actual labor market demand. Investing in foreign aid and development to address root causes of migration in Central America. Implementing humane enforcement that does not separate families or use prolonged detention. And adequately funding immigration courts to process cases in a timely and fair manner. Key voices articulating this perspective include the American Civil Liberties Union, the American Immigration Council, the Center for American Progress, and Democratic members of Congress. Their argument is that America is a nation of immigrants, and the solution is not walls, but functional legal pathways combined with addressing why people flee in the first place.
The American economy structurally adapted to undocumented labor. Removing it does not bring Americans into fields. Undocumented workers are 50% of the agricultural workforce and 25% of construction. When mass deportations occurred in 2025, farms could not find replacements despite raising wages. The administration even lowered minimum wages for temporary visa workers to help farmers, contradicting higher American rhetoric. Result: unharvested crops, food price inflation, housing shortage worsened. United States policy trapped hundreds of thousands in northern Mexican cities like Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez. Unsafe camps lack water and sanitation. Save the Children documented violence against migrant children. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum faces pressure from Washington while managing a crisis Mexico cannot handle. When President Trump threatened military strikes on cartels in January 2025, Sheinbaum ruled out United States intervention, but highlighted Mexico's 40,000 cartel arrests to appease Washington. The relationship is held together by coercion, not cooperation.
The United States southern border crisis is not a sudden invasion. It is 170 years of contradictory policies. In 1848, a war created a border that crossed people. In 1942, America recruited 4.6 million workers, then criminalized them in 1964. In 1994, Operation Gatekeeper pushed migration into deadly deserts, creating the cartel smuggling industry. In 2025, mass deportations achieved record-low crossings, but triggered food inflation and housing shortages. Throughout this history, one pattern repeats. Enforcement without legal pathways creates black markets. Prohibition turned the border into a smuggling corridor. Ending Bracero created illegal immigration. Every restriction that ignores economic reality generates a new, more dangerous mutation. Today, conservatives point to a 94% drop in encounters. Progressives point to economic and humanitarian costs. Border communities are caught in the middle. The crops in California are rotting. The situation remains complex, with valid concerns on multiple sides. History suggests there are no simple solutions. The debate continues. If you found this analysis valuable, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more balanced perspectives on global affairs.